Learning at age 14 that she had a developmental abnormality that left her with no uterus, Jennifer Dingle didn't immediately understand or share the devastation that she could see in her mom's eyes. But years later, after she got married and her friends began getting pregnant, she fell into a depression thinking about how she would be able to have a family of her own. The options, gestational surrogacy and adoption, didn't appeal to her. She wanted to carry her own child. She first heard about a more palatable solution to her predicament in her mid-20s, when her gynecologist mentioned that uterus transplantation was beginning to enter clinical trials. The doctor told her not to count on the experimental procedure, which was only just beginning to be tested in humans, but Dingle began looking into it. She found an ongoing clinical trial in Sweden and another in the UK that was just getting off the ground, and then I had my hopes and dreams set on it. Unfortunately, the Swedish trial was fully recruited, and the UK program hadn't yet begun enrolling participants. She'd hit a dead end. Then one day in early 2016, in her two-bedroom apartment on a U.S. military base in Naples, Italy, where her husband was on assignment for the Navy, she got a call from her mom back home in Texas. She says, "You're never going to believe what I seen on the news here," Dingle recalls. By the end of the year, she was headed to the hospital for the study's 5th transplant surgery, and she did it knowing that 3 of the first 4 had failed. Even facing those odds, there was nothing in me that wanted to cancel my uterus transplant, she recalls. On December 8, 2016, the Baylor team made an incision in Dingle's abdominal wall, identified the top of her vagina, and placed the donated uterus, which less than an hour earlier had been removed from an anonymous living donor, into the cavity where Dingle's own uterus should have been. The surgeons then sewed the organ's veins and arteries to blood vessels that extended down Dingle's legs and watched as it began to circulate her oxygenated blood. Finally, they connected the cervix and small piece of the vagina that had come with the donor organ to the top of Dingle's own vagina. With the help of immunosuppressant drugs, Dingle's body accepted the uterus, and 6 months later, her doctors placed an embryo made from her egg and her husband's sperm into her new womb. The idea of uterus transplantation to treat infertility caused by the lack of a functional uterus is less than 25 years old. Despite its short history, uterus transplant is now becoming clinically available. This past April, Baylor surgeons performed the country's, and possibly the world's, first uterus transplant outside the context of a clinical trial, and the University of Alabama at Birmingham, UAB, is beginning to screen patients for its brand new uterus transplant program. It has been very fast, says transplant surgeon Paige Porritt, who is spearheading the UAB program. This is a tempo that we don't usually see in medical innovation. It's going to be a transformative transplant. Patients must also consider the price tag. Just under $300,000 for the donors and recipients' surgeries and care, and the fact that uterus transplantation is not currently covered by health insurance companies. The transplant surgeons and obstetrician gynecologists involved in developing and trialing the procedure express passionate beliefs that uterus transplant is safe, effective, and addresses a need felt by hundreds of thousands of people. In addition to MRKH, which affects roughly 1 in 4, 500XX individuals worldwide, more than 600,000 people undergo hysterectomies each year in the U.S. alone, and many of them are still of reproductive age. Uterus transplant could provide a way for those people to carry their own children even after having their own wombs removed. Some in the uterus transplant field even envision a future in which transgender women will be able to carry their own children. It's going to be a transformative transplant, says surgeon Cristiano Quintini, who runs the Cleveland Clinic's uterus transplant trial, the first of 3 clinical studies to be launched in the U.S. Wanting to one day carry her own child, the patient asked Brandstrom if she could get a replacement womb. He'd never thought about transplanting a uterus before, and at first blush it seemed a bit crazy, he admits. But after discussing the idea with a colleague over beers at a pub after his shift that day, Brandstrom began to consider it more seriously. With his background in treating infertility, he was intimately aware of the needs that uterus transplantation could meet, and having just learned the complexities of hysterectomies and other uterine surgeries, I could see that this was possible. And so, returning to his home country of Sweden around this time, other physicians and researchers independently began to consider the concept. The year before, a research group in Saudi Arabia had published a case study of the first uterus transplant in a human being, completed in April 2000. Unfortunately, doctors had to remove that uterus within a few months due to major blood clots in the uterine vessels. Of course, I was a little worried because it had failed, Brandstrom says, but he adds that he felt confident that the procedure was possible. It just needed some basic research to support it. Over the next several years, he and his colleagues began transplanting uteruses in larger and larger animals. First rats, then pigs, sheep, and baboons. Please support my channel to grow by pressing subscribe button and the bell icon. We will notify you technological news. Thank you.